regarding the black-white IQ gap because it hasn't
black-white IQ gap has narrowed since the 70s.
No, people have argued that, and it's actually not really true. It's persisted at about a standard deviation. I mean, it varies depending on the test you do, so you could get like a 12-point IQ gap, a 16-point IQ, a 15-point, but it's basically a standard deviation every time they do it. It hasn't really narrowed.
Wait, no, I'm literally looking at a fucking study right here from Sage Journals.
Oh, you're looking at a study. Okay,
yeah, I know. Let's be real. I understand that you need to Stop. Shut the fuck up. I get it. You need to. I know. Okay. I know. I know you need to discredit studies because they all prove you fucking wrong. Okay. You're John Davidson again? Oh my god. Why do you always have like a different name?
Because you banned me. What do you mean?
Okay. I didn't know that I banned you. My bad.
You really said it on the stream. You're like, okay, you're banned.
Oh, right. That's right. I did. Yeah, that's right. I put you in the void. All right. Let's talk for 5 minutes. What's up?
Then. Why do you keep banning me? Why can't you like talk about this stuff? It's not like a big deal.
I'm
like
trying to talk about it right now with you.
All right. But like I have to go through all these, circuitous routes to just like. You shouldn't be this scared of this.
Wait, you were never banned from the Discord. So you can.
So what?
Wait, hold on. So you can always talk to me on Discord. I'm not scared of anything. I banned you from chat because you were being annoying and you were coping.
Okay. All right. Well, so I mean, do you realize that like all that stuff about the Minnesota adoption study, like that's just like ankle biting around it? Like nobody's disputing it. Like the only person that came out and argued with it at all is like, do you know what like the concept of attrition is in a study?
A nutritionist?
Attrition. ATT.
No, please explain.
So it's like when you have like a randomized controlled trial and people drop out, right? And so that's like a big deal because like you don't want people to drop out. You want them to sort of stay in it. And randomized controlled trial is like, the gold standard for these kinds of things. And you're obviously going to have that in the real world. Like not everybody's going to cooperate 100%. So you're always going to have some attrition. So basically what these people are doing, like this is the huge cope that they have to go through, is they say, okay, if we account for attrition, and what they mean by account for attrition is assume that like, all these people that dropped out are, much higher than all the averages in terms of like the blacks and the mixed race kids, and then lower than the whites who dropped out are like lower than the whites. Oh, then we sort of narrow the gap, and they still don't eliminate it. But and another point about that is like it's so.
Wasn't there a problem with the study though, with the fact that the black children were adopted at later times?
Not really. I mean, like again, like this is like ankle biting. Like
hold on, wait, stop.
You can always do.
You were the one a second ago. You brought up the fact that IQ is malleable up until adolescence. So if they were stop, this is why we always get into big screaming matches. Okay, so if that is the case, if the black children were adopted later on, that could contribute to a gap in IQ. Far more than genetics could.
Right, but you're misunderstanding what that means. What it means is that when you're a young child, the environment can play an outsized role, so that if you have an environment that's conducive to performing well on these types of tests, like say your parents really emphasize, pay attention and study and all that kind of stuff and surround you with sort of positive influences, then you might perform better than your peers at that very young age. But as you grow up, because IQ, the heritability of IQ increases with age, when you grow up, those effects are not like really consequential.
Okay, so here's the question though about this. Yeah. Even if you were right, which I recognize that there is certainly a heritability level of IQ, the problem that I have is when people try to say that that is on the basis of race. That's where I start to take issue. So let's hypothesize for a minute that, okay, IQ is hereditary, meaning that if you are able to lower or raise the IQ of the parents, it's more likely that the child will have similar IQ, correct? You with me so far? Am I right?
So what do you mean by if you're able to raise the...
Like, hypothetically, if there is a person who has low IQ and then they give birth to a child, it's more likely that that child will also have a low IQ because it's heritable.
Correct.
Okay. Do you also recognize that there are environmental factors that can contribute to IQ?
They're not really going to raise the heritable component of it.
Well, hold on. Wait. I'm not done yet. I want to know if you think that there are, in fact, certain environmental factors that can play a role in IQ. For example, we just read that being malnutrition can significantly negatively impact IQ.
Right, but that's actually sort of misunderstanding it, because like malnutrition can affect height, but height is still 100% heritable. So you're sort of misunderstanding the concepts here.
But wouldn't that mean then that if certain areas that might be disproportionately poor were better funded and were not as poor or were made less poor, that you could also see a positive impact on IQ moving forward?
So you're conflating poverty with malnutrition, and that's not really the case. Like,
well,
in America, in America, the poor people are fat. Like,
that's not okay. Wait, hold on. Being fat, you can still have like malnutrition and be fat. Usually, malnutrition, I think, refers to.
That's not what it's referring to. That's not what it's referring to. So,
okay, let me just look up the definition to see. Okay. Lack of proper nutrition caused by not having enough to eat, not eating enough of the right things, or being unable to use the food that one does eat. So if we're talking about malnutrition and then you say, oh, a lot of people are fat, some people are actually fat as a result of malnutrition, because junk food, greasy, fucking nasty food is cheaper than going to the grocery store or eating healthy. That is a level of malnutrition as well.
This is not a real argument that is advanced by anybody in terms. So there are basically.
I just read the definition of malnutrition though. Like, I don't understand.
Fine, but it's not the way people use it in terms of talking about IQ and stuff. But
how do you know this?
All right, you can look into it yourself. Nobody.
I am right now.
Yeah. See, this is what you do. You always do it You do it. And honestly, like, this is a legitimate criticism. You do these very sort of cursory, like, you just read something. Okay, this confirms what I want it to say. I found this.
No, some of them some of them contradict what I said. That's why I don't know if you saw earlier on stream.
By accident.
Where I know. I don't. No, it wasn't even on my screen. I could have literally ignored it, but I decided to show it instead.
Another important.
Wait, hold on. Can I at least respond to that accusation?
All right, no, come on.
I made the claim about breast milk, and then I realized that that wasn't correct or backed up empirically, so I made sure to correct myself as well.
Congratulations. Let me make the real point about this, right? So, like, you can even take, like they say, and like with the German study too, that James Flynn would promote, and it was a similar thing, right? In adolescence, the younger mixed race kids. And same with the transracial adoption. You have like the transracial adoption was remarkable because of like the almost perfect even split, like a 16-point gap between black and whites, and literally like half of that for the mixed, which had like one black, one white parent. And so they could. The funny thing about this is they could actually do these kinds of studies, and like Charles Murray has said this, like, they could do these studies if they wanted. Like, we have enough of a mixed population and an ability to quantify exactly what percent each, and they have done some studies like this, but exactly like what percent of each, race or population group people come from, and then track that with their IQ. And it would, and it has shown in various studies, like the black is at the lowest, and then if you mix black and white, it's like in between. Or if you had like 3/4 black, 1/4 white, it would be like in between those two.
It's interesting you say that when I mean, there have been other studies that have contradicted that result, but I'm not really too worried about getting into the nitty gritty there, because when you bring up the fact that, hold on, there are 2 points that I'm trying to make. Is that one, that study you referenced from like 1970 something wasn't a perfectly even split, because the black children were adopted later than the white children, meaning that they may have been more susceptible to other sort of environmental factors, which you yourself have acknowledged that when you are of the early ages, that is when IQ is the most malleable. So that's the first problem with that study. The second...
You don't understand. Wait, stop. I was trying to make a point. You didn't let me make my point. Look, and it's funny. And it goes
make your point then?
Wait. And it goes with what you were just saying, like this study's from the 1970s. Like, and that's not true. Like, I think it started in the 70s and then the follow-up was like in the 80s or 90s or whatever. But anyway, the point is this stuff, it's so toxic. Nobody wants to do this research. You can look, that Lex Friedman guy?
Oh my God, this is exactly what I don't want to talk about. I don't care if it's toxic. Nobody wants to do it. I don't give a shit. Okay,
wait.
Not only is do it. No, just stop. Because I'm bringing up my next point here. Okay, because I have another person in queue that I want to talk to.
Why don't you ever let me talk?
I literally let you go on a massive tangent. Okay, are you white? Because you're literally demonstrating that you, as a white person, have low IQ. So that's a little weird. But again, when we bring up the fact of...
This is pathetic.
Oh my God.
Hey, listen. So and you can go. There's this guy who went on the Lex Friedman I think it was like a recent one. I don't really watch that podcast, but I did see this. He's like an intelligence researcher, and they get to the part where they're talking about race and IQ, and the guy is like, he immediately goes into like scared mode when the Friedman guy questions him about it, and he looks and he's like, nobody wants to do this research. Like, no, because they know what they're going to find. Because they have found it. They have found it in the past. And
we don't even know what specific genes could or couldn't influence IQ. We know some of them, but we also don't know others. So I don't even see how that would make sense. But I'm not trying to argue whether or not people want to do this research or not. I'm trying to ask you a very specific question.
If you're criticizing the fact that it's an older study, and that
no, I'm not even.
Why?
I'm just bringing up that it was from the 70s to the 80s, and that it was not perfectly even. The sample size was not entirely even, which could have contributed to a difference of the IQ. That is all that I brought up. But I don't know why we need to go down that path when I'm trying to talk to you about the malnutrition thing specifically, and that is, do you or do you not acknowledge that malnutrition can play a role on performance IQ?
So, and this is a funny thing because you're talking about like poverty rates across like different countries. Like, why are these countries so like in such disastrous shape to begin with? Like, that's the actual point that people make about this stuff is like, but it's because like Africa is so poor. It's like, okay, but why? Why have they not developed, a civilization that is even remotely comparable to the kinds of civilizations that exist in other areas of the world?
Can you just answer my question? Does malnutrition play a role, yes or no, in IQ?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, even if there were some level of genetic factor, then the truth of the matter is we can't really change people's genes. So the best thing we can do is try and improve the socioeconomic status for individuals so that... Think about it this way, okay? You have a society that's generally poor, and their IQ is generally lower. You start making that society less poor, and then you lower the likelihood of people being or suffering from malnutrition. That person then has a child. That child is not malnourished like their father was, meaning their IQ can go up. And that cycle, even if what you're saying about it being heritable is correct, you could, over time, increase the average IQ for people that otherwise have low IQ based on malnutrition.
So again, you're conflating poverty with malnutrition, and you're talking about socioeconomic status.
Because that's what the study says that I'm reading. And this too, by the way, is from 1990. So I mean, if you said that the study in the 1980s added to the credibility, then my study being from 1989 should also be credible, correct?
What? Come on. Can you debate seriously? Like, why do you do this kind of nonsense?
The thing is you think that I'm doing some kind of debate tactic or some shit. I'm not. I'm trying to ask you a very fucking simple question.
It's just flailing.
I'm not flailing, dude. I'm asking you a question. You've acknowledged that malnutrition can play a role in IQ. So it would only follow then that if we can improve the malnutrition of certain groups of people, we would over time see the IQ go up as well.
So you're saying that there's a 15-point gap between blacks, the 15-point gap in IQ between blacks and whites is accounted for by malnutrition?
See, it's funny because you're doing debate tactics right now. You did that just now.
What?
No, you just said, so are you saying this accounts for the 15% gap? No, but I'm saying it plays a massive role in IQ.
Massive?
Yes.
Massive?
Yes.
No, who is malnourished in America? Do you understand when they say malnourished?
Oh my God, you are so fucking ignorant.
Malnourished means literally when they're talking about malnourishment it's the same way they say malnourishment affects height. So if you literally are not fed food, you will not grow. Your body will not grow. Right? This is how
there are 13.8 million people. 10.5% of U.S. households were food insecure at some time during 2020.
Do you know what that euphemism means? Food insecure. It means some fucking fat lady on welfare can't get her 5th meal of the day. Food insecure is a bullshit fucking term. Nobody in the United States goes hungry. The fat people, the poor people are fat.
Okay, so let's just break this down really quickly. One, poor people being fat is full. Stop. Poor people being fat proves my point. That is part of being malnourished. When you are not getting shut the fuck up, okay? When you don't get the proper nutrients, then that will contribute to you, yes, gaining weight. However, you've gained weight because you are eating cheaper, nasty, unhealthy food rather than eating healthy, more nutritious food. That contributes to a level of malnourishment. Yes. So you saying, oh, they're fat and they need their welfare check, LOL, is just fucking cringe, honestly. I get that maybe you feel the need to project, maybe, you were raised on welfare or some shit, but it's really lame for you to assume that this applies to everybody. The facts of the matter are, we have 13.8 million people who have had food insecurity. That could mean, let's see. Let's read what food insecure. At times during the year, these households were uncertain of having or unable to acquire enough food to meet the needs of all the members because they had insufficient money or other resources for food. Food insecure households include those with low food security and very low food security. So it only goes down from here.
Dude, this is okay. You need to have a little humility. You cannot. When they're talking about malnourishment, they're not talking about this food insecurity bullshit that people talk about. It's. You're saying there's so many things. You really just need to have a little humility about this stuff, and you're honestly relegated to arguing this point about malnourishment. And you're trying to argue that nobody believes this. No.
Apparently the study believes this that I'm citing right here. That, by the way, was with a sample size of over 1,000 people. And it said the overall observations demonstrate that even moderate degree of malnutrition influences the IQ scores, and its effect is of, excuse me, of a higher magnitude on immediate memory, visual perception, and visual motor integration as compared to verbal reasoning and comprehension.
They're not talking about eating more McDonald's than...
I know, that would be malnutrition, yes.
Yeah, and there's not that kind of malnutrition that's noticed ever as a causal effect of the black-white IQ gap. That's never
because the black-white IQ gap, you are trying to come to a dumb fuck conclusion, which is that IQ is not only heritable, but that it is based on race, which isn't true. That's where you're going wrong. So, even if you were correct, shut up. I'm going to make my point again because you literally won't do this. You need to just show some humility here, okay? So listen. If, for example, we have a large proportion of Americans that are malnourished, if we were able to address that, then over time, if IQ is heritable, like you said, we would see IQ go up. Yes or no?
Yeah, generally with the whole population, but
Thank
that's
you.
not going to narrow the gap. That's not going to narrow the gap. And
It would
listen, so
definitely narrow the gap, dude. What are you talking about? Black people are
no,
disproportionately living in poverty, meaning that black people also suffer from malnutrition at disproportionate rates.
Wait. So I was talking in terms of if you have an entire population of people that is malnourished. So I was actually taking malnourished. I was following your hypothetical there, but look, you admit that it's heritable, right? And so if you had a population of 100 people and there you have a group with higher IQs and you separate those 50 with higher IQs and you separate the 50 with lower IQs. And for 100,000 years, the group with the higher IQs are breeding and reproducing, and the group with the lower IQs are breeding and reproducing. You're going to have divergent average IQs in those populations. It's insane to think that everywhere across the world, this thing that has a huge genetic component is going to be perfectly equally distributed among all the different racial groups.
Why do you keep saying racial groups? It's not going to be evenly distributed amongst people, depending on where you're born, depending on the conditions in the womb, depending on who your parents are. There are a fuck ton of factors that are at play when it comes to the genetic heritability of IQ. Again, you are wrong to assume that it's based on race. That is your main problem here. But still,
it's based on heritability. It's based on it's largely heritable. The point is, it's largely
even if it's
heritable.
largely heritable, it's not genetic on the basis of race. Black people do not have some low IQ gene, okay? That's not how this fucking works. But again, I am trying to give you a very simple explanation here that I am literally, for the sake of
simple-minded. You're a very simple-minded man.
Why do you have such low IQ? For a white guy, you're supposed to be white, okay? Come on. Where's your IQ at, bro? Seriously. I am giving you an argument, which is, even if, and I will give this to you for the sake of argument, okay? Let's go ahead, go with what you said. IQ is heritable. I generally recognize that there is a heritability aspect of IQ, though, so sure. However, we cannot change people's genes. I'm pretty sure we've tried that before, and it was called eugenics, and it didn't really fucking work. So,
what do you mean?
The best thing we can do, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Stop. Stop. Shh.
Eugenics, you can argue that eugenics is unethical, right? You can argue that it's unethical. But to argue that it doesn't work is just wrong.
Wait.
Obviously, it works.
Okay.
You can eliminate it. If you took...
Okay, shut the fuck up. No, I don't want to hear... I do not want to hear you defend genetics right now, okay? Be quiet. All I'm saying is that if there is, in fact, a heritability aspect, and we cannot morally change people's genes, then the best thing we can do is change certain social environments to better accommodate individuals. So, if you have a problem with a group that has a lower IQ and that is being passed down to their children, by improving issues like malnutrition, then we will see a steady increase in IQ in that group. This is so easy to understand.
It's so easy, except the past 80 years just refute that. And the fact that there persists a one standard deviation gap between blacks and whites, despite all the efforts that, you are so supportive of.
Everybody's IQ has significantly gone up. There still persists a gap, largely because of environmental factors.
What?
Yes, I said... Over the last 100 years, everybody's IQ has increased. Black people's IQ has increased as well, okay? Clearly, it can be increased.
The gap is the point.
The gap can largely be attributed to social problems. For example, malnutrition. If you have a large group of people that are disproportionately poor due to historical racist prejudice against them, then you are also going to see higher rates of malnutrition, which means you are going to see an average lower IQ. That is just one factor of the many, but you've already admitted my point, and my point is simply that if we cannot morally change people's genes, then the best thing we can do is change the socioeconomic circumstances, and if we know that certain environmental circumstances can play a role in IQ, we might as well focus our efforts on improving that instead of sitting back going, LOL, black people are just genetically inferior, hee hee.
Okay, so there's so much wrong with everything you say. It's like you don't know where to begin. But God, it's just a train wreck. But it's just ridiculous. Okay, so the point is, it hasn't narrowed. The gap has not narrowed, despite all of these interventions. And if you want to talk about what's moral, these interventions, it's not clear that they're helpful. It's pretty obvious. All the evidence has pointed that it hasn't been helpful at all. And it's really
not true.
It's really not clear that it's moral in the sense that you're, what, are you going to punish the whites for achieving more things,
What?
building safer, better communities and, take resources from them and
No, what are you
redistribute it
talking
to
about? We
people
all
who,
share a civilization. Like, we pay taxes. Like,
right, but
we're not punishing anybody. What?
some people shoulder a disproportionate burden of those taxes. And whether or not we're going to allocate government spending towards these programs that have not done anything to narrow the black-white IQ gap in the 80 years that they've been promoted by people like yourself.
No, you're just being delusional right now by trying to attribute all of this to genetics. You realize that historically we've also taken different average IQ scores throughout different European countries. However, the genetic backgrounds of those people are nearly identical, which could only mean that something related to the environment is having a large effect on IQ.
Nobody denies that the environment can stunt it. Just the environment can stunt your growth, right?
And it can also benefit your IQ.
I honestly think you're sort of hopeless to a degree.
I think you're hopeless too. I mean, you're over here saying like eugenics is cool, trying to punish the whites, trying to say black people have like lower or inferior genetics. I mean, dude, you're fucking lost.
Okay. So why do you think that like 99% of the people who have competed in the 100-meter dash in the past, this is going to be a sidetrack, but look.
Yeah, can we not sidetrack, please?
The point of that is just to say that there's not a superior and inferior thing. The point is just to recognize that traits are not evenly distributed among different population groups that had divergent evolution for hundreds, at least probably 100,000 years, if not more. It's lunacy to expect that all these traits would be perfectly evenly distributed among all these populations. And
I'm not saying it necessarily would be. I'm just trying to explain that there is a large portion of IQ. Stop. Shh. I'm saying that there is a large portion of IQ that is heavily influenced by the environment. I brought up the malnutrition fact. I brought up the fact just now about different IQs throughout Europe with the same genetics. And finally, here's another one for you, okay? In the middle, I'm reading this from an article, okay? Your favorite. In the middle part of the 20th century, the Irish famously had average IQ scores that were similar to those of American blacks, despite the fact that they're genetically barely distinguishable from the British. However, as Ireland became richer and the Irish themselves became less marginalized, their IQ scores rose.
Yeah, and so that is undoubtedly due to the environment, right? So nobody's disagreeing with that. The point is just like height, right? So you could take I think like the Danish or one of the Scandinavians are like on average the tallest, and maybe like I don't know, the pygmies or whatever in Africa are like on average the shortest. The pygmies might also be malnourished. So if you were to adequately nourish the pygmies, they might reach their maximum potential height, but it's still not going to be as tall as the Danes. With the Irish, they are, if once they get adequately nourished, then and not deprived of these basic things, then yeah, they're going to reach the level of the British. The point is, we haven't.
You're making my point right now. Exactly.
Because we have no evidence to believe that anything else can be done regarding the black-white IQ gap, because it hasn't.
Black-white IQ gap has narrowed since the 70s.
No, people have argued that, and it's not not really true. It's persisted at about a standard deviation. I mean, it varies depending on the test you do. So you could get like a 12-point IQ gap, a 16-point IQ, a 15-point, but it's basically a standard deviation every time they do it. It hasn't really narrowed.
Wait, no, I'm literally looking at a fucking study right here from Sage Journals.
Oh, you're looking at a study. Okay,
yeah, I know. Well, let's be real. I understand that you need to stop. Shut the fuck up. I get it. You need to. I know. Okay. I know. You need to discredit studies because they all prove you fucking wrong. Okay. So Black Americans reduce the racial IQ gap. Evidence from standardization samples. It is often asserted that Black Americans have made no IQ gains on white America. Until recently, there's been no adequate data to measure trends in Black IQ. We analyzed data from 9 standardization samples for 4 major tests of cognitive ability. These data suggest that Blacks gained 4 to 7 IQ points on non-Hispanic whites between 1972 and 2002.
Yeah, that's all. It's all.
Let's hear it. Yep, it's all bullshit.
It's all around the edge. These are minor things around the edges.
Let's hear how it doesn't count, right?
No, it counts, but you have to take the totality of the evidence. So you look at one study where it's slightly more narrow. Okay, it's 12,
and if we compare you a totality of evidence right now.
No, that's a single study. Wait, I have to go, so I just want to say that on this issue, you really should do your homework. And I'm doing
my homework while talking to you, and you're literally proving to be nothing but a fucking brain dead idiot.
You should watch that. You should watch the Lisa Diamond video. Look up Lisa Diamond. She'll explain all the stuff.
Why don't you look up the fact that in the early 90s, there was a newer study which suggested that the heritability of intelligence is about 2/3 biological and 1/3 environmental, and that environmental factor is more than enough to account for the gap between whites and blacks. Maybe you should look that one up.
The heritability estimates for IQ are 80%. So there is so much.
Says the racist. I don't care.
No, that's just basic. That's just basic.
No, there's like a 1994 study here, which is really quite interesting. You should check it out.
Look. See, this is the point.
Let's just go over. I know you have to go, so let's just give a quick summary of what happened here. You tried to say that IQ is all just genetic or that it's very little environmental. We've read a study from the early 90s, which has proven you wrong. You're saying that it has to be on the basis of race. We saw that the difference in average IQ recorded in different European countries is. We know for a fact that. Can you stop? Stop. You have like fucking room temperature IQ, okay? We have now established that difference in average IQ recorded in different European countries is significantly different, even though they are all nearly identical genetically. So we have that factor. We also have the factor that malnutrition can contribute largely to IQ problems. So if we can fix the social problems, then it's more likely that we can also continue to see the black-white IQ gap narrow, just as we already have from the 1970s to the early 2000s.
This is wishful thinking. It goes against all the evidence.
None of this is wishful thinking when I have study after study after study that demonstrates what I'm saying, and you have nothing but a fucking freak out, okay? So it's just really cringe that you always accuse me of coping when you are the one coping right now. You're just a sad racist. You clearly have nothing good in your life. You'd rather just take pride in the fact that you're white. Somehow that gives you validation. And so you feel this desperate fucking need to fight this battle that somehow white people are just inherently better than blacks. They're smarter. Ooh, ooh. And it just looks sad. Go check out some therapy, pal.
Asians are smarter on average than whites.
Go to therapy.
Asians are smarter on average than whites.
Tell you what, if you had more than room temperature IQ, you would go to therapy.
Everybody agrees with this, that Asians on average are smarter than whites.
So are you going to try to fight for that nice coveted Asian IQ and go to therapy?
What?
Okay. Go to therapy, find something to fill the lonely void in your life, stop pushing forward a bunch of bullshit to try and make it seem as though black people are inferior to white people. That is not only bullshit, but again, this is something that you chuckle fucks tend to do quite a lot, and it's where you contribute to the problem. So for example, this is another evidence of this. It's very common for marginalized groups to have lower IQ scores, and in the early years of the 20th century, the recorded IQs of Italian Americans, Irish Americans, and Polish Americans, and so forth, were very low. And this was not because of any bias in the test, it was rather because minorities would sometimes wrongly perceive themselves as less intelligent. However, as they became more accepted, shut the fuck up. Shut up, I'm making the final point. As they became more hello, are you there? As they became more As they became more accepted, their IQ scores rose to the average for white Americans. That is what I was trying to say when that guy started freaking the fuck out on me. So let it be known that anybody trying to use the heritability of IQ to somehow push forward racist nonsense can go fuck themselves. Thank you.